My friends always tell me that I have an unusual knack for attracting weirdos, and this is always the first story that gets brought up when we talk about it. So I thought I'd share my experience with this guy from when I was back in secondary school. I'm in my final year of university now, and this guy still haunts me sometimes. When I was in secondary school, around 6 years ago now, I was friends with a group that constantly added more and more people into it. It was a good way to get to know more people from other schools, and generally, these people were quite nice and never invited creeps. One day, a new guy started to turn up and hang out with our group. For the sake of the story, I'll call him John. John was 2 years older than me, and when I first met him, I thought he was a little weird, but everyone in our group got on with him. He was good friends with someone who went to my school, so I didn't think on it too much and just tried to get to know him. He told me about where he lived, what he was studying at college, and a little bit about his family and interest. I probed him a little further, and this is where things began to get a bit strange. Bearing in mind that I had just met him that day, he begins to get all excited and told me how his father was a vampire and his mom was impregnated by him, using the exact word which unsettled me. He said it jokingly, but looking back on it, it's a tad frightening. He said that I should be worried about him because he's half vampire and he'd be coming for me in the night, and then kicked over a metal bin. Safe to say, I thought he was a downright weirdo, but I didn't go out of my way to be mean to him or ignore him because he seemed nice enough and friendly, and he never presented himself as anything but an ordinary guy. My best friend Macy had a really flirtatious personality, and John took to her really quickly after he met her. We used to go on walks, and if we found interesting abandoned places, we'd play manhunt or something. And every time we did this, he would actively try to find Macy instead of anyone else. She hated this because she was already dating someone and knew that he was trying to get her attention, and so she flat out told him that she wasn't interested in him, and he soon stopped even talking to her. I guess out of pity, I began to be kinder to him. I saw the tides were turning in our friendship group and people were beginning to talk badly of him because Macy was really popular and well liked in the group. And even though she hadn't told anyone to act differently, the fact that he'd unnerved and upset her set people against him. So I actively tried to be nicer to him. I knew what it felt like to be outcasted, and I didn't want him to feel left out, but this was something I would come to regret. We began talking most nights and we would video chat every other night because he said he was feeling lonely or he just wanted to see my cute little face. I never thought too much of his comments because I just thought they were compliments. At that time, I never really thought too much on things that guys said about me, as I was busy studying for my GCSEs, and those were constantly on my mind. He would offer to help me study, even though he knew nothing on the things that I was studying. I thought it was sweet, but I always studied better alone, so I would always say no. He would insist, but I'd again say no. Soon things escalated and he started turning up outside my school to try and see me. When I would get upset, he'd pass it off as he was actually there to see someone else, but he was always open that he was there for me. Some of my school friends began getting involved. They say that they were concerned that he seemed like a creeper and that he was too old to be hanging around our school gates. Even our head teacher came out once and lambasted him for loitering around the school's property. It was so humiliating. However, things really came to a head around April. It was my 16th birthday. He was 18 and soon to be 19. I was at home, getting ready to go out and meet friends to go to the cinema. My dad was at work and my mom was out doing the shopping, and it was just me in the house when there was a knock on the door. I knew it couldn't have been my parents because they both had keys and my brothers were all still at school, so I presumed it was going to be my friends and their parents coming to pick me up and take me to the cinema. So imagine my surprise when I opened the door and John stood there with a present tucked under his arm. He greeted me happily and pushed the gift into my hands and said that it was my birthday gift. I was really confused as I hadn't told him it was my birthday, and what's more is that I'd never given him my address. Well, I assumed at that time that one of my friends had given him my address. It later came out that no one had actually given it to him. He didn't say much else and then walked off hands in pocket, and I shut and locked the door. The messaging and calling continued, and it worsened when he began texting me. Once again, I had never given him my phone number and no one admitted to giving it to him. One of my school friends joked that he was stalking me and maybe she should have bought me a knife for my birthday. We laughed it off, but looking back on it, I don't think it was genuine laughter. After a few more incidents here and there, I stopped talking to him. He messaged constantly, but I never replied. And one day, he just stopped messaging me altogether. I was relieved, and I was able to continue with my life and studies, and I vaguely fell back into my normal routine with no worry that he'd just turn up. I had a friend, Katie, who had only joined the group about a month before. She was 13 and went to a local school. She was really lovely, and she was one of my closest friends, even though I've only known her for a month. One day, she confided with me that John had now begun harassing her and that he messaged her constantly, and he surprised her with unannounced visits to her house in the early morning, in which she had never given him her address. She also confided in me that he tried to assault her in her house after giving her alcohol. I was horrified and I felt my blood run cold. But like me, she grew up in a very strict household and her mom was a strict Orthodox Christian and she feared her mom wouldn't believe her, so we kept it to ourselves. She had a boyfriend and she couldn't even tell him, fearing that he might try to hurt John or something and that he would get himself in trouble. So I never told anyone. All in all, it was a tough situation. John hated that she was with someone else, and though he'd turn his affections away from me, I still felt involved and tried hard to keep Katie away from him. One night in about October, our group decided to go camping. At this point, there was a consensus to not invite John to the things that we did, as he had slowly dissolved from our friend group. We were camping a few towns out from ours in a field next to a Boy Scouts club, so we felt safe enough. It was a really cold night and we didn't have enough blankets, so me, Katie, and another 2 people shared a tent and huddled together to keep warm when we went to bed. At about 4 a.m., I woke up to go to the toilet. I could hear rustling outside and presumed it to be a fox or the wind, and headed out to brave the gross weather. I sat down in the bushes to pee when I heard the unmistakable break of a branch, and I looked over to where I heard the noise from. It was John. He saw me, and I saw him, and I literally couldn't believe he was there. He looked like a serial killer half shrouded in the bushes and his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. After about 5 seconds of staring, he just walked in the other direction into the tree line. I stumbled back to the tent in shock and didn't breathe until the tent was fully zipped again. I cried quietly for an hour before I fell asleep again. The next morning, I asked if anyone had invited him or if he even knew where he was. It was a closed group chat and none of us told anyone where we were going, meaning he had to have followed us from the train station to this area. Who knows how long he was there? People thought that I was dreaming, but I wasn't. It was him, as clear as day, and I will never forget the bored and plain look on his face as he turned and walked away, like I didn't even see him. After this incident, he never messaged any of us again. I never saw him again, and he was like a ghost who existed in my life for 9 to 10 months. We spoke about him and the fact that he was so weird, but we never invited him to hang again. Some of my friends at that time didn't even believe that any of this happened. Though me and Katie don't talk much, it's still something that she doesn't even like mentioning to this day. Even just his name being mentioned upsets her. I don't even know what happened to him, but I call him my casual stalker because his stalking of me wasn't nearly as severe as Katie. She told me he'd just walk and follow behind her sometimes after the camping incident, but I never saw him again. So, to my casual stalker, let's not meet again. Hi everyone, I'm a bit freaked out, so I'll just get right into it. On Wednesday night in November at around 10:30, I heard a knock on my front door. I was upstairs at that time and I wasn't entirely sure that I'd actually heard it, as I don't get too many visitors at that time, especially on a weekday. I live on a fairly busy street, but it usually quiets down at around 7:30 p.m. and a very few people other than neighbors come and go after that. Anyway, I decided it wasn't likely and that I'd imagine it, and I went downstairs, made a cuppa, and forgot about it for half an hour. For some reason, it popped back into my head and I decided to check the Ring doorbell app to see if the doorbell had caught anything. Not really expecting to find much, so it took me by surprise when I saw a stranger in a yellow high-vis jacket and a beanie hat standing at my front door just half an hour before. I watched the video and it captures the few steps he takes before he stood directly in front of my house. He looks up at my bedroom and then he takes a step back into the road. My front door opens directly onto the footpath and there's a road after that. Now, I can't tell if he takes a step back in order to see my bedroom better, or if it's because a car had just turned onto my road and he wanted to position himself between two parked cars to make it more difficult for anyone to see him. Whatever it was, he definitely seemed to be aware of the car. When the car was out of sight, he stepped forward and knocks on my door. People do this a lot despite me having a doorbell. And the moment that he knocks, he starts to act even weirder. He rubs his head, he's looking left to right, and then up at my window, and then left to right and up at my window again. He sighs, as though he's exasperated, and then something to the right catches his eye, and he very swiftly power walks off in the opposite direction that he came from. Moments later, I hear my neighbor's front door open, and I realize that this strange man has seen the neighbor walking toward his door through the privacy glass and decided that he didn't want that confrontation. I lived in a terraced house, and it's easy for neighbors to get confused by whose door is being knocked on. I call for my partner to watch the video, and he also has never seen this man before, but agrees that he looks really dodgy. I send the video to two of my brothers, who also agree that he looks shifty as hell, and advise me to call the police if he comes back and to call them right away. Now, We live in a high crime area, and we've all seen our share of drama and trauma, and we're all detecting something off about this man. It's not just a case of paranoia. Anyway, I decided to check previous captures by my doorbell, and I see this guy walk past my house 4 nights in a row. Just walk right past and that's it. The last and 5th time he's caught was the incident I just described, and he's never seen again. So, last night, about 11 p.m., I'm in my backyard emptying my indoor recycling bin into the outdoor one when I suddenly get an odd sensation and look to my left to see what looks like the shape of a man standing at the far end of my alleyway. In some English terraced houses, 2 houses will share a long alley that is sandwiched between them and sort of built into brickwork. They're really dark even in the daylight, and most people will agree, quite scary. Mine and my neighbor's back gardens can be accessed through our alley, and it leads right out onto the street. Now, my alley has a large gate that I try to keep locked at all times, but I have noticed someone had been only putting the latch on and not locking it with a key. Anyway, back to the shape. I don't have the best eyesight, and so for a moment, I think my mind is playing tricks on me. It was like there was a vague man shape that was darker than the surrounding dark, and so I'm looking at it, trying to convince myself that my mind is playing tricks on me, when suddenly, my heart is in my fucking throat because I hear frantic footsteps coming from the direction of the shape, and I suddenly lose sight of the head, or where I thought the head was, like it had suddenly ducked down or something. I literally flew into my house and locked the door. I stand in my kitchen looking out of the window, not knowing what to expect, when I realize my partner is in the shed doing woodwork. So I text him, someone is in the alley and to stay put. And what he takes from that is, run into the garden wielding a hammer. So that's what he did. This fucking creep would have had plenty of time to realize what was going on, as my garden is long, and so he took off. My partner confirmed the gate had been messed up with and opened. I'm just wondering if 2 things are linked and what everyone's thoughts are. I have the video, but I live right across from small businesses with its name in huge letters, and so for privacy reasons, I'd rather not upload it. Update: I have reviewed the video that you can't really see the name of the businesses as clearly as I thought. If you would like to watch the video footage of the guy by my door, please check out the description of the video and the link will be there. It all started in high school. I was a naive, shy, and awkward 14-year-old when I asked this one guy to our school's Sadie Hawkins dance. I knew him from a mutual friend of ours, but we really didn't talk. All I knew was that we both liked anime and manga, and that he was kind of quiet most of the time. So I wanted to be nice, and I asked him out to dance. That was mistake number 1, and that started the years of torment. He said yes, and we agreed that we would just meet at the dance with the rest of our friends. A few hours later, I get a message on Facebook from him, and it's a long message telling me that he'd always had a crush on me, and that I was beautiful and that he couldn't compare my beauty to anything else because he considered that an insult to how beautiful I was. It was pretty cringy, but at the end of it, he asked if I would be his girlfriend. I was uncomfortable after reading the entire message, but again, being the shy and awkward 14-year-old that I was, I told him yes. Mistake number 2. He was ecstatic. He asked to call me that night and asked for my phone number, and I gave it to him. Mistake number 3. He calls me later that night and I learned a lot of things that I did not want to know. One of the major things was that this guy was a massive crybaby. I'm not trying to say that men that cry are weak, but this guy would cry at everything and would always play the victim. Felt like all his friends didn't like him? Cry. No girl other than me would love him? Cry. Teacher failed all of his assignments even though he openly admitted that he didn't want to do any of the work? Cry. The list goes on, but I'll get to more things later. I also learned that night that he had a foot fetish. Now that I was his girlfriend, he was going to do so many things to my feet. Again, not trying to shame anyone, but as a 14-year-old who didn't like showing off any part of my body, I was uncomfortable, and when I went silent for a little bit, guess what he did? Cry, because I thought he was a freak. That was his words, not mine. I told him no, and I didn't think that, though I was really starting to, and he instantly cheered up. He continued to call me every night, and the conversations were usually the same as the first night he called, until the night of the dance. At the dance, he mentioned that he'd never had his first kiss, and how sad it was. I already had my first kiss at this point, and I'm so glad he wasn't it. I kissed him at the dance, just to get over with. However, throughout the night, he would try to kiss me even more and even tried shoving his tongue in my mouth. It got so bad that a teacher had to pull us apart. Of course, he goes off to sulk and cry. After the dance, I get a text from him saying how magical I made the night for him and that the kiss was delicious and how the stupid teacher didn't understand our love. I was feeling pretty sick to my stomach at this point and I wanted to break up with this guy, but I stayed a little bit longer. Mistake number 4. 2 days later, he asked me out on a date to the movies. Stupidly, I said yes, and he asked if one of his best friends could come along and if I could bring one of my best friends, since his friend found her attractive and wanted her to be his girlfriend. I told both of them no because he wasn't her type, and in all honesty, she hated him. They keep pushing me to bring her, but I keep telling them no. Now, his best friend calls me killjoy cunt. And he did his usual thing of crying because he didn't get what he wanted. We go to the Lorax at night and his friend sits behind us. The second the lights go out, he turns my head and starts kissing me and pushing his tongue into my mouth. I try to push him away because I was not going to let him do me the entire movie. Again, his friend is right behind us and he keeps trying to kiss me. Movie ends, and when I get home, he sends me a text saying that he was depressed and a picture of my feet would make him feel better. I told him no, and he threatened to kill himself, and it would all be my fault because I didn't send him a photo. Horrified at how fast he snapped, I sent him a photo. Next night, he asked if I had been naughty lately. Knowing where this was leading to, I told him no. He then starts crying about how I was cheating on him and that I had been being naughty with other people, and again, he threatened to kill himself. I tried to calm him down by telling him that I was a virgin and I was not a sexual person at all. He suddenly, as if on a dime, stops his fit and asks me if we could just completely forget about what just happened. I tried telling him that what he did was incredibly inappropriate and was about to tell him to leave me alone, but he pulls the victim card again and starts crying. During the crying, he asked for another picture of my feet to calm him down. Scared that he was going to snap again, I sent him another picture. This continued for a few more days until he would try and message me whenever I was busy with school, babysitting, volunteer work, and many more, and he would accuse me of cheating, telling him what was going on, him saying sorry and playing the victim, and asking for pictures of my feet to calm him down. I eventually had enough, and after 2 weeks of dating him, I broke off the relationship. He cried, of course, and begged that we at least stayed friends. School year was ending, and he said he was transferring to a new school, so I figured I would never see him again. Wrong. Beginning of the school year, he would message me, and when I didn't respond, cry and threaten to kill himself. After a while, I just started to ignore the messages and threatened to call the police if he didn't stop messaging me. Thought he would have stopped after that, right? Wrong. Every year until I turned 21, he would message me random things at random times. Examples. Hey, my friend. We're friends, right? Can you send me a pic of your feet? Ugh, I miss you. I'll leave you alone if you want me to. I'm pathetic, aren't I? And so much more. And each time I ignored him and finally blocked him on every platform he tried to contact me on. Fast forward to 21, I'm in college and ways away from my town and from him, and have a boyfriend. I get a notification from Instagram saying that he started following my profile. I quickly block him, and not even 5 minutes later, I get a message from Facebook from a random profile that I didn't know, and the message read, "Why did you block me on Instagram?" I lost it. I sent him a long message telling him that if he contacted me in any way, shape, or form, I would get a restraining order, and told him how damaging it would be to his reputation and his future career. Again, he played the victim and told me that he couldn't believe that he fell for a liberal bitch like me and to never contact him again. I've never heard from him again, and good riddance. A few months later, I get a message from a girl who used to date him as well. She told me that he used to threaten to kill himself and cry if she told him she ever left him. Again, I'm sorry for the long post. There are more details to the story, but this is already way too long. Every summer, with a few friends, we take a trip to the seaside of France for about a week. Last year, Oscar on the southwestern coast to go surfing, but ended up in a small touristic village called Molietzema, an hour from where we were supposed to go because of a reservation messed up. The week was going okay until the last 3 days of the trip, but the story I'm going to tell is the last night's. So, the past 2 days, we had been in trouble with the police and a few other tourists because of some misunderstandings over a pack of cigarettes. We had spent the last 2 nights stressing and trying to cool things off, and therefore, we thought the last night we spent there couldn't be as bad as those 2. And it couldn't possibly be, as we were leaving the next day very early in the morning. So we had only planned to go to a restaurant for dinner with some friends we had met there to celebrate the trip. The dinner was great. We were all having fun, and as time passed by, it started getting dark. Toward the end of the meal, my best friend, Dennis, who was driving us home the next day, thought it was best for him to leave early and not drink too much so he could sleep as soon as possible and be in the best shape for the long drive that was coming. He left about 15 minutes before the rest of the group while we stayed and drank a bit more. We paid the check, and as soon as I got up from my chair, I received a message from Dennis. "Call me. There's a guy following me." Here's what happened. Dennis had to pass through a caravan parking lot and a golf to get back to the residence in which we had rented a house. While he was in the parking lot, he noticed someone behind him that was about his size with a hood and a cap on. At first, he didn't think anything of him, as the village was actually quite touristic and there were a lot of people usually passing by the parking lot. But when Dennis stopped to pee on a tree, he had a glimpse of a guy behind him, stopping and hiding behind another tree a few feet back. And as soon as he got walking again, the guy stepped out from behind the tree and started following him again up to the golf. As Dennis got there, he was a bit creeped out, especially since at night the golf is completely dark and was only lit by the moonlight and empty of people. He stopped again for a second to light a cigarette and checked if the guy was still behind him. Once again, the guy stepped out of the path and hid behind a tree until Dennis started walking again. That's where he understood that he was in danger. The guy wasn't physically imposing, and so Dennis thought it was weird he was confident in following him. Maybe he was holding onto a knife or a gun. Nevertheless, Dennis kept walking and acting as if he hadn't noticed anything, although the guy was following him again and sent me the message, "Call me, there's a guy following me." As soon as I picked up, he talked loudly to try and scare off the guy by saying, "Hey, you're at the golf with the other 8? No problem, I'll be there in a minute." Even though we were 5 and absolutely not at the golf, which was terrifying for me. But it was clever because it made me understand that he wasn't joking and where he was. I swore to him that everything was going to be okay and that I would be there in 5 minutes. I told him to be careful and safely try to go home. But as soon as I hung up, I started running towards the golf and explained very briefly to my friend that Dennis was in trouble and we had to get to the golf as soon as possible. Meanwhile, when I hung up, Dennis put the phone back in his pocket and kept walking. He took a glance back and saw the guy was still a few meters behind him. He took a last puff off the cigarette he had lit 2 minutes before, then threw it and started running towards the residence. As he was running, he took a look back and saw the guy started running too. It lasted for about 5 minutes before he got in front of our house, which was empty. When he got there, he stopped for a second, looked back one last time, and the guy was about 10 meters behind him in the middle of the alley, immobile, and then went to hide behind one of the cars that were on the side of it. As soon as Dennis saw that, he panicked. He barged into the house, locked the door with difficulty, grabbed the biggest knife he could in the house, and waited on the couch, facing the entrance to the house, which was a glass canopy. When me and my friends got there, he was scared but unhurt. He explained everything to us and then we went looking for the guy in a group of 4. The neighbors hadn't seen anyone other than us, and even though we got to the residence at first in separate groups, at different times and through the 2 different entrances, we didn't see anyone coming out of them. He had completely disappeared. Nothing was stolen, even though we had left clothes to dry outside of the house, and nobody was hurt. So, we didn't call the police, but warned the neighbors. And me and 2 others stayed up all night outside to look out for the guy as he had seen where we lived, and we were afraid that he would return during the night. Dennis had been lucky. We never knew what were the intentions of this guy or if he was hiding something that gave him the advantage over my friend. Furthermore, he didn't even try to get into the house, and good for Dennis because there was another entrance to the house. Another glass canopy that led to one of our friends' room and which had not been correctly closed. We couldn't even understand what he did. If he wanted to steal from Dennis or murder him, he could have done that in 2 separate times, when he went to pee and when he lit his cigarette. But he didn't. So what did he want? Who was he? And where did he go? I don't think we'll ever get any answer. We can only hope that he never did anything to anyone and was arrested if he did. We didn't call the cops back then because we had trouble with them the past 2 days because of the problem with the pack of cigarettes I talked about before. Also, after those 3 days that had gone wrong, we just wanted it to end, go home and sleep. I regret not calling them now that I think about it, but it's too late now, and I hope this guy hasn't been creeping on anybody since. We are all extremely tired the next day, and the drive that was supposed to be 5 or 6 hours long took 10 hours to complete under the heavy summer heat. But we all got home safely, slept well, and never had any problems of that sort since, and now we laugh about it. To conclude, I would advise you to never walk alone at night in places that you don't know much about. There are crazy and weird people everywhere, and a calm night can quickly turn to a nightmare if you don't watch out. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked it, and that it made you think about being more careful at night. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I would also like to thank my following patrons: Fire05, Gabriel, Maskino, Ralph, Lori, and Jake. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. If you want to support the channel further, you can be a patron too. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.